Hey, welcome to the Simple Nutrition Podcast, a show that helps you learn practical and actual nutrition tips from an expert. I am your host, Leonila Campos, a registered dietitian with over 8 years of experience in the nutrition field. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Simple Nutrition Insights Podcast. I am your host, Leonila Campos, registered dietitian. And today I have a special guest, Terry. Terry has done a past interview with me where we talked about creating an exercise routine, right, for beginners. That was such a really good episode. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to it, please go and I'll try to put the link in the show notes. But check it out. So thank you so much, Terry, for coming back and spending some more time with me.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, so let's start with maybe letting the listeners know who you are, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, my name's Terry Linde. I've been in the fitness industry for 30 plus years, since 1987, mainly as personal training is how it started, and then got into nutrition programming, corporate wellness, and some fitness products. And over the years, I've worked about a third of my clients have been people that have had some form of diabetes, whether it's pre-diabetes, type 1 or type 2. And I've worked with a lot of, with their medical professionals, with other holistic health professionals, and I've learned quite a few things over the years to help them with fitness and nutrition to help manage their blood sugar.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Which is so important to talk about the fitness aspect of it, right? Oftentimes when someone is diagnosed with prediabetes, right, or any of the other types of diabetes, fitness is not something that is talked about, right? But we know, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, that is so important, right? Just exercise in general is extremely important for our health and well-being. And so as you were working, with maybe past clients, and so you were creating this program, was there a specific motivator as to like, I really want to work on like this specific program to help people that have diabetes?
The main thing that got me thinking about putting everything that I've learned over the years into an actual program and course, and worked with the American Diabetes Association to get it approved as a DSMES course, was one client that I worked with for over 30 years, one of my very first clients. She was a type 1 diabetic, and learned quite a bit for the issues that she had, the progressions over the years, and what things helped her with the fitness and nutrition to control the diabetes to a large degree. And she and her husband went on multiple cruises every year. So that was their thing. And on one of the cruises, she got sick, fell ill, out of the country, and actually had some heart trouble and passed away. And when the husband got back, he mentioned to me that based on what the doctors had told them with her diabetes, that he felt like what we had done over the years with the fitness and nutrition had added an additional 15 years to her life. So that kind of just sparked something in me, and I took all of the information and the programming that I'd put together over the years and put it into an individual course.
Right. That is just, it's sad to hear, right? But it's amazing to know that, right? Like, hey, with the work that we did together, you were able to add years to your life, right? And I think that is so invaluable. And oftentimes, people don't really realize that, right? That when we change our eating behaviors, when we add movement, right, it's not just because, for whatever reason, but it's actually adding years to our lives, right? Because, it's so essential. Our bodies are meant to be moved. And
Right.
so I think that
the
is
quality
amazing.
of the life.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, specifically that, right? Because when we think about, and someone that maybe hasn't had that experience, right, either working with someone that has diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes, right, or these other health or chronic conditions, they don't really see how their quality of life is affected, right? To a point where they might not be able to do things on their own, or they lose that independence. And I think as human beings, right, that is once we lose that, it's almost like, okay, then what's the point, right? Because we're so independent, essentially. But can you touch a little bit about how exercise, right, helps someone, or can help someone that has diabetes?
And especially depending on the severity of the diabetes and such, it is more of, so exercise a lot of times is a term that people think of. You have to get into a gym and spend hours sweating and such. But it's not that. It is movement. It's activity. It's basically getting the muscles to move through a full range of motion for a period of time, trying to get the heart rate elevated to get some conditioning there, get the blood circulating. From a fitness aspect, the most important thing is getting balanced musculature around the joint to help prevent injuries and keep the movement and the mobility going over the years. The consistency with a fitness program is the most important, not actually like certain exercises or working out to a certain intensity, but keeping the consistency and the activity going week after week, year after year.
Right. Yeah. And oftentimes that's the hard thing, right? The consistency, because consistency with anything, right, creates habits, creates behaviors. And so in your experience, right, in terms of exercise specifically, what does that look like, the consistency part of it? Like how often, for how long?
It does depend on, say, age, experience levels, where we're starting out, but a good minimum is 3 times per week. With strength training 2 times per week, some sort of strength training, and it can be with body weight. It doesn't have to be certain exercises or equipment needed, but 2 times per week, and then at least 3 times per week for some sort of cardiovascular, walking, biking, cycling, something that gets your heart rate elevated somewhat to keep the circulatory system going. And the biggest thing from doing that consistently is decreasing the resistance to insulin that your cells build up over time. Even with type 1 diabetics, if they're taking a lot of insulin year after year after year, they're going to get insulin resistance at some point, but that's bigger with type 2. And then that can help reverse a lot of the issues with type 2 diabetes, is increasing or decreasing the resistance of the cells to the insulin, and activity is what helps do that. So from a structured program, those are the minimums, but ideally they're going to be some sort of activity, whether it's gardening or housework. In addition to that, something daily to help with the insulin sensitivity.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that you're saying, mentioning some really practical ways of moving our bodies, right? Like we can do some gardening, and that could also serve as like a stress relief activity, right? Or, building something, walking, right? Sometimes people think like, oh, walking doesn't do anything. Oh my gosh, walking does amazing things specifically to your blood sugar, right? So I think, again, it comes in terms of the insulin sensitivity, right? And how your body's able to use the sugar, right, in the food that you're consuming for actual energy, right? And so by doing that, because you're moving your body's going to need some of that blood sugar, right? And so even walking can help with that. So sometimes that is some of the things that my clients and I talk about. Okay, no, I don't want to go to the gym. Okay, no problem. Let's start with some walking, right? And if you're having a bigger meal, right, at the end of the day, let's add some walk, right? Some steps in, and just to get your body utilizing that blood sugar more and better, right? And so I think that it is definitely important to remember that it doesn't have to be, like you said, going to the gym and like exercising for hours, because a lot of the times people don't have time for that, but something more realistic, right?
And if a lot of times, like people with diabetes might have problems with their feet, like with a neuropathy or something, or bad knees or something like that. So if they can't walk, then they can use their upper body for movement. But just getting movement and activity is important for that, and consistently doing something like that every day.
Right. And thank you so much for bringing that up, because it is absolutely important to remember that when you do have diabetes, right, if you have neuropathy, right, you do have to take care of your lower extremities even more. So making sure that you're checking your feet every day, right, to make sure that there's nothing happening there. Because again, you lose that sensation of if you bump your foot on something and now you have an injury and it's not healing, but you're not feeling it. And so, but as you mentioned, right, like you're still able to do other things to move your body, which also helps with that circulation, right? Being able to send more blood through those areas, which we need it for oxygen and just for lower inflammation and these other things too. But I think it's so great that you've, and I'm sure you can talk about these too, is the personalization, right, of the program for each client that you have. And so how do you work with that? Like what's your approach for that?
I think a good example is the client with the type 1 diabetes, because she over the years did lose all the sensation and feeling in her feet, and she would bump them fairly frequently and actually break bones. So she had to be put in a walking boot. So the walking boot puts your foot one leg up a couple inches to 2 inches up higher than the other. So that creates a lot of problems on the other side with the knees, the hips, the back, and such. So we had to work with her a lot on working on like stretching out the side that was pushing the leg up for the shortening of the leg and strengthening the other side to balance it. So a lot of unilateral single limb type movements and adapting it. But outside of those types of things, just to fit it in, I work with a person to fit it into their lifestyle. So whatever they can start with, whether it's 5, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, if they can't make it to the gym, if they want to work out at home, if they want to just do body weight, if they prefer a certain activity, working with what their likes are, and then designing the program so that they're getting the recovery, they're getting the range of motion that they're needed for each muscle group, and I'm trying to make it as fun as possible for them, so it's not a chore to do.
Right.
And just building consistency, starting small, and working with each individual basically for their likes to fit it into their lifestyle and get it to become a habit.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that personalization plays a huge role, right, in terms of not only for someone to be able to do it, right, because they're tailored to what their likes are or their needs are, but also because you're really looking at that person and seeing, okay, what do I need to adjust, right, for this person to make sure that they're not only being safe, right, but they're also getting progress, right? We're seeing that progress. And I think this is really important for the listeners to understand that, yeah, you can find all kinds of resources online, right? And all kinds of, I don't know, stuff per se, in social media or YouTube or whatever. But I think really knowing, right, like really going to the expert, someone that has done it for years, like Terry, right? And he is going to do an overview per se, right? And like really tailor those exercises to your needs. I think that is so important to do, right? And seeing it as an investment for your health, and that it can add years, right, to your life. So, any thoughts on that for the listeners?
Yeah, for example, if it with certain exercises, so a lot of the ranges of motion for an exercise are determined by a person's skeletal structure, how long their legs are compared to their torso or their arms or such. So if they're going to do a certain exercise, it might not be, and they follow a video that they just watch or see or a description, it might not be correct for their actual structure. So the exercise and the movement would be good for them, but not necessarily the range of motion that they see being done. So, for example, for a pushing motion, the range of motion safely to be able to work the chest is determined by the thickness of the torso and the length of your arm. So if I was to do a bench press and come back, I'm roughly looking at where my elbow comes even with my shoulder. That's going to be the full range of motion that my chest can do. Because if I go down deeper, the chest, there's no pulley in the shoulder. So the chest doesn't have a line of pull to be able to pull the arm across, which is its main function. So I need to stop here, which would be about, say, 6 inches off my chest for a bench press. But if I watch a video and see somebody touching their chest with the bar, and I do that, then I'm going to end up typically with a shoulder injury, which is very common. So knowing those types of things, the exercise might be good, but you need to know what is correct for your body. And that goes for every joint, whether it's shoulders, back, knees. So it's that education that I think is the most important, to be able to safely do a program. And then also knowing how to change it up, because your body does get used to doing a certain thing, and you do need to change it up periodically. And some people like it changed up every time. Some people might not like it changed for 6 months, but whatever time frame is for the individual, changing the exercises, the sets, the repetitions, so you're hitting different parts of the muscle cell, the endurance components, the strength components. You're still getting the cardiovascular benefits and the flexibility benefits and mobility benefits. You can't address all of those issues with one program, so you need to focus on 1 or 2 of those items and then change it up throughout the year, so that over the year you're getting and you're focusing on all of them, but not all at once.
Right. Thank you so much. Yeah, for mentioning that, right? Because sometimes I do hear clients say, "Oh, I've been doing this forever," and I'm like, what progress are you seeing, right? Essentially, because if we do something over and over and we're not seeing any progress, okay, we have to change things. But also, you get tired, right? When it comes to that consistency and the motivation, you get to a point where you're like, this again, right? Like, I don't want to do it. Okay, that's a hint, right? That you need to you either modify or change something, because now you're seeing it as a chore, right? Now you're seeing it as something else that you have to do. And when that happens, you're going to think of every single excuse not to do it, right? And then that becomes a problem, because now you're like, whatever, I'll just try it some other month. And so I think, I love that what you said about changing it up, but also for getting all the benefits, right? And seeing that change too. So when it comes to someone that has diabetes, right? Are there any specific things that you like to see as you are building the programs, right? Or that you like to track throughout the duration of your program?
The main thing I like to track is, and especially like with CGMs now, you can track the blood sugar on an all the way throughout the day and the weeks, and see the differences and when things spike, when things come down, and you can see the changes of what different, like a meal calorie level, total calorie level for the day, the meal components of protein, carbs, and fats, and how a different ratio of those can affect or have a change on the blood sugar. So monitoring the blood sugar and working with their doctors, for typically people with diabetes might have high blood pressure or something else also. So the types of movements, when you're working with somebody with high blood pressure, you want to avoid like heavy overhead lifting. So nothing overhead. So you keep everything down under their shoulders. And it's more, I guess I'd say the biggest thing would be educating them on why their blood sugar might spike. So like a lot of times after exercise, when you start exercise, anaerobically without oxygen, your body uses carbohydrate. So it tends to raise your blood sugar. And if a person goes into exercise and they'll say, well, my blood sugar spiked or raised up to X amount, right when I exercise, so I don't know if I should be exercising or such, but that's a normal response. So educating them on why that blood sugar goes up, when to expect it to come back down, and trying to show them that information, and then that kind of ingrains it in them to build the habits. So I guess I would say, like with the new technology, I like the CGMs the best for monitoring that and seeing how different aspects of sleep and stress and normal lifestyle or life events come into play, and then educating them on why the blood sugar goes up or why it goes down, and then how to monitor, or not monitor, but how to adjust things to make sure that it stays as stable as possible.
Right. Yeah, the CGMs, right? The continuous glucose monitoring, absolutely gives you so much data, right? And we love, well, at least I love data because it tells you so much, right? And like you mentioned, have been able to educate patients, right, or clients about that, because sometimes they do get so stressed or they get like so overwhelmed because they don't have that education, right? Once they understand, they're like, okay, this is normal, right? Things are gonna come back down, be stable, or like, okay, they're being really high, and let's figure out why. But that also helps you, right, as a provider, uh, to figure out the reason why, possibly, right? And I think having that collaboration with their doctors is also important, right? Because maybe now that they're exercising more frequently, right, or that they're eating their nutrition is better, right, there might be changes in their medication, right, where that they can talk to their doctors about that. And I think having that communication and that collaboration, right, is important. It is a holistic approach, per se. Yeah.
Well, that's a very good point, because adjusting the medications is necessary a lot of times as they get consistent with activity, and the insulin resistance of the cells does decrease. They ideally need less medication, and they do need to work with their doctors for that, and make sure that their blood sugar isn't going down too low, as well as not too high.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is amazing. So let's talk a little bit more about your program specifically, right? Like, what's the name of your program? What is it about? And like, who's a good fit for the program?
We call it Conquer Diabetes, because it's a matter of wanting to be able to control diabetes, or be able to manage it effectively yourself, without just relying on medication to manage blood sugar. So we have 3 versions of the program, different levels. The one that is basically fitness and nutrition, customized programs for a person, and then up through meeting with a registered dietitian, and coming with a glucose monitor and those types of things. So wide spectrum there. Mainly, we work with newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes, people with diabetes. But it can be for type 1 or pre-diabetes also. We've had a fair number of success, especially with people with pre-diabetes, of keeping them off medication altogether, and bringing down their A1C under 5.7. So those, I guess, those people would have the biggest success with staying away from medication, but it does fit for all, because it's a customized program on the fitness and nutrition level. It's a strong educational component, so that meets the American Diabetes Association criteria for the education materials on blood sugar management, the medications instruction, and then we are also working with the medical community, their doctors, to make sure that the program's effective for them. But mainly it's newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up the pre-diabetes aspect of it too, right? Because there is research that shows that someone that is, and so just for the listeners to know, right, pre-diabetes is 5.6 or 5.6 to 6.4, right? That's the range of pre-diabetes. 6.5 and higher, that's the diabetes diagnosis. And so if someone has been diagnosed with pre-diabetes, right, and you're not changing anything, right? You're like, yeah, everybody has pre-diabetes. Okay. So if we don't change anything, right, in 5 to 10 years, you are going to develop diabetes. There's the research is there, because again, we get more insulin resistant every time, right? And so it does get to a point where your body is like, well, I gave you this warning. You did nothing to help me, right? Now we're here. But there's also research that shows that for someone that is Hispanic, right? And I mention this because I am Mexican. So every time I have a Hispanic patient that says I'm pre-diabetic, then we really work on these changes, because for us, Hispanic, right, if we don't do anything to change our nutrition, to add movement, whatever, we are going to develop type 2 diabetes in 3 to 5 years. So that's a lot less, right, for most of the general population that is 5 to 10 years. So yes, maybe everybody has prediabetes, but if we don't do anything, we are going to develop type 2 diabetes, and now we have to manage it, right? And so I'm definitely about prevention. So if you have the resources, right, which we do at this point, we have to do something, right? We have to be able to make these changes to be able to prevent it, right? And if we have it, okay, now we're going to manage it to a level where our blood sugars are so well controlled that it seems like maybe we don't have diabetes, right? Which is great for overall health and well-being, for our cardiovascular health, for your kidneys, right? Because uncontrolled type 2, uncontrolled diabetes in general, uncontrolled high blood pressure leads to kidney disease or kidney failure. And now we're into dialysis. So it is extremely important, right? When we think about, okay, someone has diabetes, okay, let's do everything that we can to manage those blood sugars, right? And as we're talking about here, movement is one of them, right? And we're not saying go to the gym, right? As Terry mentioned, there's so many things that you can do to get your body moving, even if you have these issues. However, you do have to reach out to someone that knows about that, right? To make sure that you're getting the full benefit and also preventing injuries too. So I love that you also mentioned the education part of it, right? It's extremely important, again, for just the population to know more about their condition, right? Not to say, okay, here's your medication, I have diabetes, this is what I take. But understanding their bodies, right? Understanding how blood sugar is, right? How insulin is. And I love that your program does that too, the education part of it.
That's just a big part, because people need to know, everybody's blood sugar raises and lowers, and they need to understand why, what affects it, how like an illness affects your blood sugar, and it raises your blood sugar, stress with cortisol, and how glucagon is the opposite of insulin. So how both of those hormones work together, and they need to understand what stimulates glucagon is protein and exercise. So that helps raise the blood sugar, and then insulin lowers your blood sugar, and knowing how to balance the two, and what adaptations to make if they go through a stressful period, or if they go through times where their sleep isn't that good, or anything that can affect their blood sugar, and understanding why it might go up and what changes they need to make to help counter the negative effects of those time periods.
Right. Yeah. And of course, we can probably just do a whole episode on just sleep and stress, right? And how that affects blood sugars, because it's a big one too. But just understanding that those factors also affect your blood sugar, right? And if you have diabetes, right, how you're managing that, as well as when you're sick, right? It is a stressful situation when we're sick. And so that can also affect your blood sugars. But I think what we're trying to say here, right, that there are providers out there, right, that can support you. So even if you're feeling lost, or even if you've asked your healthcare, your doctor, and your doctor was like, no, I don't know. Sometimes doing more research on your own, right, to find those resources that you need to help you manage, right, the condition, or just anything in general, anything that you can add to that.
Looking for the education is a good one. And DSMES courses are great, which is Diabetes Self-Management Education and Support programs. And you can find those with a web search for national programs that do that. And a lot of like hospitals in local areas provide those courses, but the educational component is a big one.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Terry, anything else that you would like to mention? Anything else that you would like to add about your program or the services that you offer?
Just that we do have the programs and services if anybody is interested. So anybody can feel free to contact me with any particular questions, and I'd be glad to go over any information with them or concerns that they might have. Other than that, just trying to get active and increase your activity, make some goals, get moving more, focus on good nutrition, fruits and vegetables, lots of water, managing the stress, all of those types of things. But yeah, just make a point to start the sooner rather than later is much better in this case.
Right, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'll make sure to add all Terry's information. So if you are interested, right, and you're looking in and want to try his one of his programs, right, I'll add that to the show notes so you can check it out. Let's see. Yeah. Anything else? Any final thoughts?
No, that's about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Terry, for joining me. I think this is such an important topic, right? And just letting the listeners know that there is a program out there that can help them, and then they're not alone, right? So that sometimes is it's a big one. So thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Stay strong, stay healthy. I will talk to you and see you in another episode. Bye bye for now. This podcast, the links and resources provided are for the purpose to educate only and are not a replacement for medical advice or nutrition therapy. I suggest you seek out the help of a trained professional to help you with your specific situation and needs.